work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, January 9, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Boland,
Here.
Councilmember Galani, Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
All right, excellent. Welcome again, everyone. Good to see all of you. And before we get to action items, under informational items, I believe we have 10, one of which is the Old State Road report that we'll talk about just in a moment. But before we get to that, does anyone have anything else under informational items that they would like to discuss or about which you have a question? Councilmember Clark.
Yes, thank you. Under F1, I think it's 4F1, if I'm not mistaken. The Historic Preservation Commission has the Route 66 Park information. And I just wanted to mention that that's not on the strategic plan. And if we need to make some moves to add that to the strategic plan, since it is quite a high dollar project that we're working on.
That's a good point. And so one thing that I don't know if this was your intent necessarily in bringing that up, but relative to maintaining consistency with the items that things that we do and the strategic plan, and I might direct this to you, Steve, our city administrator, what mechanism do we have? And if we don't have one, should we have relative to making sure that these extra things, that may not be in the strategic plan get included and in a formal sense and that sort of thing?
Thank you, Mayor. That's a good catch that it's not on the strategic plan, but it is in the 5-year plan. So anytime these things come up, then I think it is up to the staff to make sure that there is consistency between the strategic plan and the 5-year capital plan and make sure they're on there. And if it's not, then it should be up to the staff to bring that to the attention of the council and in a memorandum or whatever and add it to it. And of course, there'll be coordination given the changes to the strategic plan worksheet that Councilmember Clark is working on. So we'll coordinate how that gets done through Councilmember Clark.
One thing I might suggest, and I don't mean to mean to indicate that I could do your job better than you do. I'm just going to throw this out as an idea for you and all of us. What if we had sort of a strategic plan designee czar, that whether we bring up something or someone at a city team member level brings up something that is not in the strategic plan, they make a note of it and, we're made aware of it because they usually have budgetary implications before we go down the road and all of a sudden realize that we aren't following the plan. Is there such a person, if the council's agreeable to that, is there such a person that you think you might be able to designate for that role? And if you also agree with that, I guess.
I do agree with that, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I have someone that I could assign that role to.
Is everyone on the bench good with having someone designated at a city team level to let us know as indicated? Councilmember Dodwell.
I was just going to indicate, would that not be a city administrator's role, is to help bridge that gap between council and staff?
It could be. Do you have an opinion on that, Steve?
Councilmember Dodwell, yes, ultimately it is the city administrator's role, but that doesn't necessarily mean the city administrator, he or she needs to do it. But ultimately the communication to the council would be through the city administrator. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else, Councilmember Clark?
No, thank you.
All right. Anything else under information that any member of the council wants to bring up? Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, and I just want to, before I ask a question, I just want to make a comment that the strategic plan is fluid. Because some things don't happen and something else comes up and we can switch money around. So it's not something we can write down and it's really in stone. It's a good guide, but you might be able to move projects around because one project hasn't been started and that's what you had funded for this year. But another project is ready and there's funding for it. So it's not set in stone, it's more fluid sometimes. My question, I've got a couple questions. One, Old State Road, I thought that was a really good write-up that Rick provided. My question is, can we go ahead and put the LED warning signs up before we do anything else? So there's something there?
We're going to get to that in just a moment. I'm clearing out anything else under information before we get to Old State Road.
Okay, I thought that was information, sorry.
It is. I just saved it to last because I know we're going to have some discussion on it.
And then my other question is, Main Street is a private street, but it's Crestview that's a private street, right? Is Crestview still a private street?
Mr. Vinich?
Yes, ma'am. Crestview Drive is a private street at this time.
And I know in the past, the residents who lived on there didn't want an extension and they wanted to keep it private. So is that philosophy changed from the residents?
Yes, ma'am. McBride Homes has approximately 6 of the lots on the north side of Crestview Drive under contract for a new project. And the city owns 2 on the south side of Crestview Drive. And then Mr. Bosworth has the other 3 on the south side of Crestview Drive for another project. So there's only one property that's not part of either the city ownership or under a development proposal at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Anything else under information before we go to Old State Road? All right, Old State Road. So with the indulgence of the council, I'm just going to tee this up so it will hopefully sort of hone our discussion. And I want to recognize Councilman Mark Harder and his team from St. Louis County who are here tonight. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. We appreciate that. As was noted previously, and when when we asked Rick to draft this report, ultimately this road is a road that is controlled by St. Louis County, not the city of Wildwood, and so that is why they are here. You have in front of you at the table in addition to Rick's report that was posted with the agenda, a summary of the city's actions, both monetary and non-monetary, relative to Old State Road. The monetary actions to date total, give or take $160,000, $60,000. And so I just want to make that known. Rick's report has a series of recommendations, starting with flashing LED warning signs, high friction surface treatment, guardrail installation, shouldering, and I think that's it. And if you're okay with this, I'd like to just ask Rick a couple of questions about this so we can kind of get these prioritized. Is everyone good with that? Rick, so one question I have, my recollection from the discussion and the speakers that we had at the last meeting is that the real focus, if I had to prioritize it, and anyone feel free to tell me if you disagree, and you as well, Rick, one was guardrail. I would list that as priority number 1, and 2 would be the high friction surface treatment possibility. Is that everyone else's understanding, sort of where everyone was with that? Rick, is that a fair assessment?
Mayor Bolden, I think that's a fair assessment. I think that's really what I heard, and that those are typical safety improvements that could be implemented.
Okay. City Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think that's how we left it at the last council meeting. But I will say, in the conversation that we had with Mr. Harder's team last Thursday, potentially the high friction putting something down on the road might actually be something they could do sooner than guardrail, potentially.
Okay. And we're going to get to that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that information. So I guess what I would propose, just to get the discussion started, we could probably talk about any one of these 4 or 5 things all night. But I would suggest for this meeting, let me just ask it as a question, would everyone be in agreement, given what we believe to be the priorities of the residents and Rick's report, as well as our other discussions and the information we just got from our city administrator, to limiting tonight's discussion to the guardrail installation and the high friction surface treatment. Does that sound reasonable, Councilmember Garetano?
I think we should also talk about the intersection of Ridge and Old State, because that is also another one that keeps coming up over and over.
Okay. We'll add that. Is that agreeable with those three? Councilmember Bartoni?
I agree with those, but the first recommendation on his list is the LED warning lights.
Yes.
Should we include that in the discussion as well?
Well, we can. What I was going to suggest relative to this one, I guess I would like to see statistical data that show the LED warning lights actually have the effect that's intended. I mean, I get the fact that there are lights on a sign, but I haven't seen any data that show whether lights on a sign cause someone to pay attention to the sign more than the color of the sign itself. So, you know, we can talk about it if you want, but I just want to make sure that if we go down that road, I guess I'd like to see before we get there, information that shows those to be effective. Councilmember Fleischer.
Yeah, real quick on that. I mean, the signs in general are really highly reflective. I don't know if you ever drive down there at night. I do quite a bit because I live so close. And I mean, they reflect like crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the lighting them is going to make a huge difference as far as visibility of those signs.
And therefore, that was my next point. Thank you. Even if we had that data, that would be a comment that I would make. Councilmember Dodwell.
On another note, we've got a request on Strecker to put up flashing signs. And I've had several residents indicate that that's more of an annoyance than it is a help. And so I would like some statistics on, or some information on how well those really do what they're supposed to do.
Yep. Councilmember Hopper.
Right, Councilman Dodwell actually kind of took the point that I was going to make. It really on Old State, to back up what both Councilmember Fleischer and Councilman Dodwell said, that the additional reflective strips that are on those signs, like they really stand out as you come up to it. And I think the flashing lights, if somebody's going to go too fast and not pay attention, I don't think they're going to make a difference to somebody who's burning through there and going to wreck anyway, over what we already have. So you're talking, I think, a minimal improvement. Just takes focus away from other things that might make a real change.
So the consensus I'm hearing on the flashing signs is let's get some data and see where we are maybe at the next meeting. Any disagreement with that? Okay. Any issue, Councilman Harder, with that approach, having that later? Okay. All right. So that takes us to guardrail installation and friction surface treatment. And in a nutshell, I guess my first question would be, given that this is a county road, what, as we sit here today, is the county's position? And if you, Councilman Harder, or anyone wants to come to the podium, or all of you, and answer this, but I think it would help us to know what is the county's position today in a nutshell relative to, number one, whether you think either or both of those are warranted, and two, whether you're willing to pay for them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board of Aldermen. My name is Mark Harder, St. Louis County Council, your district representative. I have with me this evening our Deputy Streets and Public Works Director, Joe Kalissa, and he's brought with him Chris Haber and Alan Spector, who work in this area, and this is in their wheelhouse, so to speak. So from my standpoint, I'll let Joe, as our technical person here, to tell him, but my standpoint, we got to make the road safe, and we will, but we have to look at what is the right thing. As you know, we're in a position county-wise when it comes to spending, and we've got to get the biggest bang for the buck because we don't have the bucks to get the bangs. So we have to work just like you do, is making sure we're doing the right thing with what we have that gets that saves the most injuries, and making sure we get the right solution to the problem. But we have to understand the problem too. And I think talking to the police captain and to Mr. Cross and others on this board, one of the major things that has come out of this discussion over the last couple of months is speed. And people have to slow down on that road. It's posted, it's 30 miles an hour. It's 35 at some spots. It moves up to 40 at some spots. And we're finding that people are not even getting close to that number in some cases. So even though there's been fatalities, there's been one fatality that I know of, and there's been some near misses, of course, and some minor wrecks and major wrecks. We have to look at each one of those cases and find out, you know, was speed a factor? Was a distracted driver? Was it daytime? Was it nighttime? And kind of understand the process. And I'm leaving it to our experts here to kind of look through those numbers and to help us in this regard. So Joe, if you would.
Absolutely. So if I could just ask, so the two questions I've got, and I think we want to know relative to the guardrail specifically and the friction, if you've made a decision, if you haven't, that's okay, we can come back to it. But has a decision been made relative to those two? And if, you know, i.e. proceeding forward with it, and if so, what is that decision? And what would would you be paying for it, I guess?
Absolutely. So at this time, no, we have not made a decision on what would be an appropriate, or I should say that appropriate. They're both appropriate treatments for the corridor. So that's first and foremost. But as far as which one we would prioritize over the other, no, we have not made a decision on what that would be. So let me take a step back to explain some of the things the county is doing right now, which will lend context for us to Old State Road, as well as helping to establish safety priorities countywide. We're in the middle of a safety study and design build project with MoDOT. The step one of that project is to analyze crash data countywide and figure out where our problems are, where our hotspots are, as well as identify systemic improvements that can be made on our system. The second part of that is a cost share to make some of these safety improvements. So there's roughly $4 million that's going to be spent on safety improvements through this on county roads. If Old State percolates to the top in that safety project, that's where we're looking for those improvements to come from, as far as us being able to pay for them. It's basically a 50-50. So it's a significant financial incentive for us to work with MoDOT on that. Secondly, that study, what isn't identified in that study and able to actually construct, is going to help us form a basis of prioritization of safety projects countywide. So that's another thing that we have to look at, is when we spend $1, are we getting the most bang for the buck throughout the county? So high friction surface treatment and guardrail, both would be good treatments on Old State, no question.
But it's about, I'm gonna hear, what I think I hear you say is it's essentially going to come down to what this study shows relative to higher priority items versus, you know, given the money that you have to spend, what you're going to spend where.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. And when, to you or Mark, when will that report be done?
Right now, we're hoping to see final results from that report late this year, with construction on improvements throughout the county, starting sometime mid-24, wrapping up sometime in 26.
Okay, so I think then what that means as a practical matter, and I definitely appreciate that information, you know, from both of you, but as a practical matter, I think what that means for the city of Wildwood is, unless, and correct me if either you think I'm wrong, unless we have money in the budget to pay for these things now, the better approach would be to wait until your report is done to see what comes out of that relative to your participation in it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
So what is the will of the council on this? Councilor Edens.
I just have a hypothetical question. When we've decided before about projects where we perhaps were not comfortable spending certain amounts on roads we didn't maintain. So I'm referencing conversations from 2-3 years ago on MoDOT roads. One of the things that came up was, are we setting, you know, some sort of precedence where we're absolving the body that has a responsibility of maintaining that by assuming the costs ourselves? And I'm just sitting here wondering, because the residents don't really care about that, but I have to care about that as an elected official. Is there something that we could work out where we would pay for it up front, but with a contract with you, the county would pay your portion back over time? Because I hear what you're saying. You don't have the budget immediately. So can we work something out where we're sort of like lending the money and then paying it back into our reserves over time? Has that ever been done?
Not to my knowledge. We have done cost share where we split the cost in some proportion or other. That's always sliding depending on what the improvement is. But I've never seen us take an upfront payment to then be paid back over time in this context.
Well, what I'm saying,
You're essentially be issuing us a bond, is what you're proposing.
So like, if you can't pay for your portion of the cost share, can we work something out so that you can pay for it over time?
Or if I could add to the question.
Yeah.
Since you haven't done that, would it alter the analysis on your part relative to your study if we were to come to you hypothetically and say, we'll pay 30% of X of the guardrails? We would pay 30 or 20% or whatever. Would that move it forward if there's agreement to move it forward? Or is it still going to be contingent on the study?
So it's contingent on the study. Well, okay, so let me take a couple steps back to give you a bit more context. I have no money to spend this year. We have our projects are coming in significantly over what we budgeted for. And I'm not sure we're going to make it to the finish line on what we've got programmed. So right off the bat, that's a problem that we have, where the transportation funds are spoken for, and then some.
Well, my question is like for next year or the year after.
Yeah, so getting out into further years, I'd like to see this, what the results of the study are first, because we're not talking about something that happens in the very near future. We're still talking a year away. As we're going to see that study in the relative near term, I'd be able to see how this shakes out against the other needs throughout the county. And then, yes, in those cases, cost share can accelerate a project if it's towards the top of the list anyway.
But what I hear you saying is not until you've got the study completed.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think it's important too, is at that point, maybe we'll get a better understanding of, what kind of guardrails, the price of guardrails. Sometimes these projects, especially in the case of guardrails, and I have familiarizing with the old Hillsborough Road, which is over by Valley Park. And we try to put guardrails up there, and it turns out that we've got, the fall off is so great that you've got to do all the shoring up just to get to a concrete platform to put a guardrail up. So it's all those extra costs that you don't see on the surface until you get into the site prep. And then that adds millions sometimes to the project. So, but yeah, I think the survey needs to be the first step in this process.
Councilmember Harder. I'm sorry, Hopper.
A bit of a tangent, I think it's
Is that accurate?
Yeah, so either the guardrail or high friction surface treatment, either of those would be on the table with this MoDOT safety cost share. In addition, like I said, the MoDOT study, is just the start of prioritizing safety improvements throughout the county. So it's not that if we don't get it done with the MoDOT project, we're not doing it. That gives me the basis to run after more money, whether it be through East-West Gateway or one of the different federal programs that's out there. That study is going to form the basis of how I run after money to get more of these things done. So the MoDOT project is probably the fastest that any of it gets done. And the high friction surface treatment is probably the easiest because I don't need to buy right of way. I don't need to do infrastructure improvements. It's a treatment that goes over the existing road surface. So from a logistical standpoint, it's the most straightforward. Guardrail, we definitively have some investments to make because of the slopes, because of the rock that's close to the surface. There's a lot of other compounding factors that we're going to have to mitigate that need to be studied more in depth. High friction surface treatment. If I have number one, money, number two, simple contract, number three, you get the contractor out there. It's a very easy product to get into place.
See Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Mayor. Joe, when we talked on Thursday, we talked about this, we had mentioned, you had mentioned that accidents, off the road accidents around 2017 or so, we're running about 4 or 5 a year. But starting in about 2020, 2021 and 2022, it's 3 times that. It's running 15, 16, 17 a year off the road. And I thought I understood you to say that potentially, I know, you know, to the side of this cost share study that you're looking at with MoDOT, that perhaps 2 or 3 of the significant curves down there, you might be able to put down some aggregate or something, a high whatever that might be something we could do quickly, because we talked about the residents are looking for something that we could do right now. I know there's drawbacks to it, the noise, you know, we talked about rumble strips and so forth, but I was hoping that maybe this high friction, that would be something we could get done sooner rather than later based on our conversation on Thursday.
While it's a simple product, it's an expensive product. So I think you saw in Rick's report, he ran numbers and he came up with in today's dollars to do everything is about 450,000, I believe is in his report. So even doing a little bit is expensive.
So to cut the chase, is that accurate or inaccurate? Is it all going to have to wait on the report that you're doing, or is it possible to do something more needed?
It is not possible for the county with our funding situation where it is to move anything forward at this time.
So as much as I hate to say it, I would submit that it would probably be best from a financial standpoint, given all the budgetary constraints we have across the board, that we wait until we get information from the county as to what it can contribute before we go down these roads. But I don't like saying that, but it is what it is. It seems like. Councilmember Dodwell.
This is just a hypothetical situation, but is there any way that you can put any kind of signage at both ends of Old State Road as you pull off of Manchester and head out of Ellisville, and then as you pull off of 109 that says driver beware, difficult road, just like you see when you're going through the mountains, something that alerts them that I don't mean to be rude, but hey, dummy, slow down. I don't know what else we can do. You can't always fix some of those thoughts.
No, that's a fair question. And I'd like to point out first off that the Department of Transportation has made a significant investment in updating and upgrading all of the signage to the corridor. So that was obviously the first thing we did. So
yeah, I see.
the only thing left that we could do is potentially put up some like slippery when wet signs or something to that effect. Which I have to admit, I don't think will make any difference. The data does seem to show that the wet roads contribute and speed contributes. And I mean, I know I drove that road on my way up here. I drove the speed limit and I had people backing up on me significantly by the time I got to the end, and there wasn't a car in sight when I started up the road. So just interesting. I was trying to get a feel for it, and anecdotally, obviously that's only one time. I don't know what y'all experience daily. But speed is definitely a factor on that road.
I guess one thing too, I would say, if you bear with me 1 second, one caveat to what I mentioned earlier about the city doing something, we might look at possibly at our mid-year budget, since we just approved the budget. Maybe, you know, the guardrail's got a price tag of 170 to 200K, you know, kind of depending on how things go. If we have more income than we anticipate or whatever, we might could look at that then. It's just something I thought of. Councilmember Hopper.
Yeah, a couple things with that. One question I had is, as Senator Crosser mentioned with the high friction surface. I understand the price tag's pretty high there, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is the price tag that you put on here, Director Brown, is that to do like all of that southern portion of road of Old State or just portions of it?
Council member, if you looked at the memo in that exhibit, it's most of the southern portion, but not all of it. I tried to limit it to the portions that are more have the more excessive curvature and left out the sections that are straighter.
Okay, I thought I read that. but I wanted
Contiguous.
To clarify on that, so. So yeah, I mean, as much as I kind of hate to say it too, I think we're at a point for big chunks of things. I think we absolutely move forward at looking at what we can piece together, or at least information as much as we can gather on doing some of this stuff on our own, or how much we can contribute, because I think we've got to start moving the needle on this a little bit.
And would you want that done now, or would you want to wait to mid-year budget? There's no right or wrong. I'm just asking what you would.
Well, I guess my biggest question is of how much we could move forward with in small increments, I guess, to have a better idea once it comes to mid-year budget time to know what we're gonna do.
Okay. Would there be any objection to asking Rick Brown, our Director of Public Works, to putting that together for the next meeting?
That'd be good.
Everyone good with that? Okay. You guys presumably are good with that, I guess.
Just-
Absolutely, yeah. For the record, we have no objection to applying a high friction surface treatment. I do it tomorrow if we had the budget to do it.
Yeah.
So if
And-
you have the budget to do it, we're interested.
I hear you. And then back to the question that came from Councilmember Edens. You know, even though you simply whether that might be something that the county could participate in,
I can ask that question.
either fully reimburse or partially reimburse, you know, down the road. And if you want to, I don't know that you need to come back here necessarily just for the purpose of discussing that at this point, but if you could at least get a written communication to our city administrator so he can share it with all of us. Between now and the next council meeting, we would appreciate that, I think.
Okay, yeah. One other thing I'd like to address that she actually brought up is, does it somehow set a precedent that you now own this? No, unequivocally, no. We work with municipalities and other stakeholders all the time where they contribute or pay for an improvement, bring something to the table. The complete limits of that interaction are bound by an agreement. So that isn't unless you agree to do something in perpetuity, you don't have any ongoing commitment. Everything is bound up in that agreement, whatever we agree to in writing.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
And Councilor Garitano, you wanted to talk about, well, before we get to that, so is there unanimity in the approach that we're gonna get a report on what the city might be able to do, at least incrementally, between now and the next council meeting, and then we'll hash that and see what we do. Is that agreeable with everyone?
Mhm.
Okay.
Rick didn't hear exactly. Could you repeat what you would like him to put back at the next council meeting? He didn't hear.
Okay, so in the minutes, it would reflect, anyone please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your suggestion, Councilmember Hopper, was that Rick prepare a memo for the council to determine what, on a prioritized basis, at least incrementally, maybe consistent with what money we could come up with to spend sooner rather than later, and prioritize those for the council's consideration in its next meeting relative to the southern half of Old State Road. Okay.
Correct. And especially as we would go in your budget, knowing
What we're dealing with. Yep. Okay. So Rick, we're just going to have to, we got to move the meeting. Did you hear that? Okay, you got it. Councilmember Clark.
Yes, two quick questions. One is, when do you anticipate, what is the timing for that report being able to come back to us? And the second is the county, I mean, when there's a road like this and you can't have a police car there monitoring speed because there's no place to pull off. And maybe I'm asking John Young this. Is there a way to monitor speed and have like a speed camera or something and a sign that says speed is being monitored just to slow people down?
Go ahead, City Attorney Young. I think those are illegal.
Well, in terms of speed cameras, I don't believe the county has an ordinance that provides for like speed-based cameras, like for issuing of citations. And I know there's some hesitance in the state about allowing those. But the second part of it, your question, can they put up just, you know, the here's what your speed is, here's what the speed limit is you're going over. Legally, can they do it? Yes. Practically, is it feasible to place in that location? I don't know the answer to that.
Councilor Garitano, you want to talk about Old State Road?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I want to just follow up on some comments. I support that we try to look and see what we can do from the city perspective, because as we've heard tonight, doesn't sound like there's much that the county can do this year from a budgeting perspective. But you referred to this process and you said that you're looking at roads throughout the county. And where I have trouble with is that it feels like we just never make the list with our roads. But in Wildwood, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have two county roads. We have Clayton Road and Old State Road. Am I right, or am I missing a road here?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's.
I think so. I mean, those are the two county roads that we have here in Wildwood, and yet we are one of the largest cities in the county and in the state. So the two roads that the county is responsible for, and we just feel that, you know, at least the conversations that I've had basically from when I first started in this job, especially for those residents that live on Old State Road or off of Old State Road, Councilmember Galani's neighborhood, which relies on Old State Road to get in and out, are that people don't feel safe driving on that road. And I have the Pulse Point app, which is a great app because every time Metro West has a call, it notifies me. And in December, I was getting weekly notifications of an accident on Old State Road. And it basically collaborates with what I hear from people, that there is always something there. And those are only the reported ones. We don't know how many are unreported, or maybe those are only the ones that Metro West responds to. So to me, the trouble that I have is, and I don't know if it's a flaw in the process, is that you're comparing the two roads here with.
Sorry. Sorry
You're
about that.
comparing,
Okay.
no, that's fine.
Huh? Yes, and she knows I'm in a meeting.
But you're comparing the two roads here with your network of roads throughout all of St. Louis County. And so what bothers me is that I don't know that we ever make the list, because we're probably being compared to too many other roads. Do you ever consider looking at maybe sections of the county, like which roads are perhaps the ones that need the most attention in, let's say, West St. Louis County and other parts versus other parts? Because maybe that at least helps to get some attention to those immediate areas. I mean, this is what the world that our folks live in, is these two roads right here. And so, you know, I feel like folks feel like, you know, and I apologize if it comes off the wrong way, but that the county's ineffective at serving the needs of the community. I mean, it's just comes, you know, just feels that way. And I don't know what other answer to give them.
And if I could just add to, I'm not, without getting into the, you know, the statements there, but just factually, we've made two applications for that roundabout and have proposed to put up considerable sums of the city's coffers to do that. Anyway, with that in mind, if you want to answer that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to start out, the county in general is tens of millions of dollars annually short of basic system maintenance. Of our system, only 35% of our lane miles are even eligible for federal funding. So 65% of our system, we fund 100%. And we take a needs-based, basically worst first methodology to addressing the needs on our system. Now, worst first, we have other needs lists. We have.
So his question is, can you compartmentalize it?
No.
Okay.
The answer, the short answer is no, because that would not be equitable for the, if your roads, roads are rated 1 to 10. So let's say your road's a 5 and that's your worst road, but I've got somebody else with a 2. And yes, I have people with a 2. I can't come and work on that 5 just because I decided to compartmentalize it into West County or to in North County or South County. I need to look at the road network as one organic animal and do my best to triage and keep our system passable. So that's really where we're at. It's definitely not that we're trying to disenfranchise any community. In fact, it's the exact opposite. So we're trying to make sure that we are fairly doing what we can anywhere we can. And believe me, I've heard that sentiment from many communities, many cities throughout the county. We are not doing enough. Hands down, I agree with you. We are not meeting the needs of our citizens when it comes to transportation. We don't have the funding to do it. What you're seeing is just one more element of that lack of funding to have a system that the people really want.
And I might add that the highway department posts a list of that priority list. It's on our website, St. Louis County website, under, I guess, transportation.
Yes.
And it shows all the roads and that rating system from 1 to 10. And you can see where maybe this project would fit if it was in that list. And right now it's not, of course, because there's probably, how many are on that list right now?
The section from Old State Spur to Ridge, I think, just popped into spot number like 37, something like that.
So 37, so that means that there's 36 roads that are in worse shape in St. Louis County at this point. Yes, we'd all love to see that there. I live off of Clayton Road. There's parts of Clayton Road that need some help, but nothing to this extreme. And it's not even on the list. So that's kind of where it is. And to answer Councilwoman Eden's point, you guys have also contributed, when we put in the flashing crossing light close to Ridge Road, we were able to work out with the city. You guys put in and paid for the bases, and we were able to pull those lights off another project to get that in, and that was done in about 3 months' time. And the new direction of Ridge Road in Old State was redone, and we paid for that whole thing to solve that problem as it was, and hopefully it is working well. But now there's another problem, and these things do pop up, and they pop up all across the county the same way.
Councilor Garitano.
Yeah, well, I think just a final comment on that is that I think the citizens of Wildwood, especially the property owners, being one of the largest cities, we also pay and contribute a lot of taxes to the county, but I don't think we're getting our money's worth back from the county. And that's how I feel. Back to what I asked for before, which is Old State and Ridge, because that is an intersection that we continue to hear about, and it comes up and folks feel it still needs more improvements. And I know the county, I'll give you credit for that. You did some work on it a while back, realigned it. But we have been trying to address that intersection. We proposed a project where we would do a roundabout, but I just learned that the county will not be able to contribute this year or maybe even next year or not. So that leaves me, as Wildwood left stuck paying for it if we ever want something like that done, or is there a solution that we can find through cost share or something else that would work?
Yeah. So that section, what was proposed to me is that, the two cities wanted to cost share on just a roundabout project. We know it's not going to score. We would have to bring a lot of money to the table, very healthy match for that project to score. The safety numbers based on East-West Gateway scoring system don't prove that out to show a significant cost benefit. It's a great spot for a roundabout, don't disagree, but it doesn't rank in their system, unfortunately, by itself very well. So what we're going to be looking at, and as soon as we wrap up our applications for block grants this February, We're going to be looking at the entire corridor, pavement improvements, pedestrian improvements, the roundabout, see that what could we get to score holistically on that corridor? Maybe 24 is an opportunity for an application. It depends on how it ranks against all of our other needs. Maybe it's 25, but we are looking at it here in the near term to figure out what makes sense and what would actually produce a project that'll be supported.
So we got to get, unfortunately, to the next, we got stuff we got to get through. I want to thank all, is there anything else before we close this up? I got one last thing I want to ask the two of you to work, coordinate with Steve. When your report, I guess we'd like, if there is maybe to either of you or both of you, if you could maybe on a quarterly basis, let us know kind of how that report's going, if there's no objection to that. And then when the report is finally done, if we could have another meeting like this to discuss some of these things, and maybe at that point you'll have what I know you wanted to come here with tonight, which is money to offer to fix Old State Road.
Indeed.
All right. Okay, anything else for anyone? All right, thanks so much to both of you and your
Thank
team
you.
for being here. Appreciate it, Mark, very much. Okay, moving into action items, strategic plan. This, I don't think will take too much time. So you got a memo today. I'm sorry, Council. Oh, that's right, we do. I'm sorry. Okay, we have a presentation relative to HPC. Why don't we go ahead and do that?
Hello, thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Scott Rundy. I'm a landscape architect with SWT Design. I'm also joined by with Bonnie Roy here. She's a partner with SWT Design. I'm going to give you a short but sweet presentation on the Route 66 roadside park project. So a quick overview of the design process. This has been 10 months in the making, and we've had kind of three key phases. Starting with the site investigation analysis. We've also had a robust engagement process where we've engaged several stakeholder groups, including neighboring residents, adjacent business owners, as well as student task forces. As well, we've been working with a project team that consists of Historic Preservation Commission members and other Route 66 stakeholders. And we've used the analysis and engagement to inform our concept designs that we developed throughout the process. The top right of the screen, you see some the four kind of first concepts we developed for the park space. And we've had two review meetings with the project team to review our concepts. And with each of these, we've been able to get solid direction on the designs and add more detail with each review. On the top left, you'll see two sketches that two concepts that we prepared. We presented at the first review meeting. And then the bottom left shows a rendering that we presented at the last meeting that shows the design direction that we've been moving towards. And based on the feedback that we've received throughout the process, we developed this finalized concept plan for the roadside park. And we feel that this provides numerous attractive gathering spaces and several areas that provide an opportunity for learning and play. And most of the amenities on the park are located along the Manchester Road streetscape. And there's kind of three main spaces that compose the park. One being the comfort station, which includes bike parking and bike repair station. The middle portion includes a central plaza space with a photo op element that has a dual purpose as a play feature. And then the west part of the park includes a splash pad with a shade structure, as well as additional outdoor dining tables and seating. And each of these spaces, we're using seat walls, landscaping and grading to help define the spaces. But they're also unified with what we're calling a timeline walk, which is special pavement with interpretive graphics that speak to the Route 66 history. Additionally, we have a small parking lot and buffer landscaping on the southern portion of the park space. This is a bird's eye view. This is good to show the three spaces and how they're defined and unified with the timeline walk. This is a street level view of looking from the streetscape perspective. This is a street eye level view looking from the southern portion of the park. And an eye level view looking from the western portion of the park. So we've also started to look at various interpretive elements that kind of speak to the Route 66 history and specifically Wildwood's Route 66 history. This has included a number of elements ranging from signage to graphics and emblems placed in the pavement to reusing repurposed historic items such as gas pumps as electric vehicle charging stations. We've also conducted initial cost opinions for the project. So for total construction costs, we're looking at just over 1.6 million. This provides a breakdown of how those costs come out of the project. And we've also developed some site area totals for additional information on the design. So next steps is project funding allocation. Determining funding sources, budgeting, further design development of the architecture and interpretive graphic elements. And then that will lead into final design, engineering, permitting, and bidding and construction of the project. So with that, thank you for allowing me to come here and speak tonight. Field any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Just one comment that I just looking at the splash pad. I suppose I see a lot of problems with that. And I would just suggest that we look at that very closely and maybe eliminate that from the park. It looks like way too much maintenance to me.
Yeah, we've had some discussions on that element. And if it doesn't fit in the budget and maintenance costs, that could potentially function as just flexible plaza space, additional outdoor dining, or maybe even a small outdoor classroom element.
So on a macro level, I think one thing I would suggest, just to save everyone a lot of time potentially and grief potentially, not necessarily that this would be the case, but you sat there and heard discussion that we've got as to some pretty significant, safety issues and so forth. And obviously we have budgetary constraints when we spend other people's dollars. So I would say as early as possible, maybe even at the next council meeting, we have a discussion and see what the appetite is of the council to do this before, and if so, when, so that there's that guidance before we put any effort or money in particular in toward it. And that may have been your intent, but I think that would be strongly advisable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Edens.
My concern about the splash pad, and this may be what Councilmember Clark was referencing, but a lot of times we keep having more and more frequent historic droughts, right? And so municipalities in those cases are advised to turn off excessive water sprinklers, et cetera. Is this something that would even look okay or be an enjoyable surface to play on if it's only used once in the next 10 years? Or are kids gonna have shoved pencils down the little water spouts and break them off, and then it's going to be a maintenance issue trying to pull them out, or I just.
Okay, so Councilmember Dodwell.
I was just going to ask, I don't see on here any water fountains. Could we just turn the splash pad away and put in a water fountain there, because we have bikers that are going up and down the roads around it. And if we could provide a water source where people could refill water bottles or get a drink after their child has played in the area, rather than the splash pad, I think that might be a little bit more cost effective for all of us.
We are planning on the comfort station. They're getting a dual level water fountain with a bottle filler and also a dog bowl feature.
Okay, perfect. So then we can just take the.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Being here.
We
Okay.
look forward to working on it. Later.
So moving next to our action items of strategic plan. Hopefully we've got a few minutes here. Let's see if we can get through these quickly. So you got a memorandum or email rather today from Councilmember Clark relative to this. assuming everyone got that, I don't need to know that we need to go through each line of it. Did everyone get that and understand where she's coming from relative to, I think basically, is it correct, Councilor Clark, letting everyone sort of assimilate what we've got, and then at the next meeting, you're going to come with the concrete revisions for approval. Is that a fair assessment?
That is exactly what,
Okay.
why I put that out, because I didn't want to go over every detail in the work session. And if there's any comments, or you see something that I put on there that you think is wrong, I'm open to that. I make lots of mistakes. So just send me an email and I will try to make the revisions that the council wants.
Councilor Dodwell.
I just want to add to the factor that just like we had the conversation earlier in our discussions regarding the fact of, well, we've got things on the capital improvement plan and we've got things on the maintenance plan. I want to make sure that somehow those two get dovetailed into the strategic plan so that we keep abreast of everything that is coming before us and not have things suddenly pop in that we didn't know about as we go forward. So having one location through our strategic plan of this is where capital improvements go, this is where the top priorities go, et cetera. So I'm looking very forward to having further discussion at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I want to reiterate, I think on behalf of all of us, thanks to Councilmember Clark for the work that she's put in, as well as others who've assisted with it. So thank you so much. All right, next up, Councilmember Brost. You've been provided with a memorandum from Councilmember Brost relative to forming a 3-person committee that will, and the council will engage a consultant to work with them. And he'd done a terrific job with this memo, pointing out the rationales for it and so forth. Larry, I know everyone's seen the memos. Or anything you want to add before I ask for a motion? Councilmember Brost, I'm sorry.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me okay. Believe it or not, I didn't have good internet, so I had to go to a Starbucks. No, I hope everybody had a chance to read it. I do want to just point out that there was several council members that had the last meeting with Spectrum. I think we all left feeling that they were certainly getting some momentum. And I do feel over the next year and a half or so, we really need to stay on top of making sure this gets done for our residents. You know, as we all know, Mr. Cross is hoping to join the ranks of being retired. And we also need to be real mindful for a good succession there. So I would, if there's any questions, I'd really like to have a chance to answer them, but I hope everyone's in favor of this. I think in the long run, the city will save money, and we will, you know, we need to get this done and get it done, and then the city get out of the internet business. So thank you.
Thank you again, Councilmember Brost. Is there anyone have a question for Councilmember Brost? Is there any objection to the formation of the 3-person advisory committee? Okay, so seeing no objection, the minutes can reflect that by consensus, the council has approved the formation of the committee. To move forward with this, I would propose for the council's consideration and approval that the 3 members be Councilmember Brost, Councilmember Dodwell, and Councilmember Rambo. There were obviously several people, good options for this. Any one of you would have been terrific. And as you probably know, like different reasons for it, trying to get good representation, primarily from the 2 rural boards, but also someone such as Katie that has a slightly different perspective on it that I thought might be helpful as we move this forward. And if you're okay with those 3, then I would, if not, I'd have happy to take questions, but if you are, we could do a consensus approval on those 3 as well. Everyone good with those 3? Okay, so by consensus, those will be the 3. We will, the advisory committee and I will work with our city administrator relative to identifying a consultant to fill the role as set forth in the memo. And that will be before the council at its next meeting. Okay, everyone good with that? All right. So the last item we have is an executive session. We're at 6:30. If there's no objection, I would propose that we recess the work session, take a 3-minute break, come back and do our regular meeting, and then resume the work session with an executive session as the only part of that following the council meeting. Is everyone in agreement with that approach? Okay, so the minutes will reflect that we're recessing by consensus the work session. And the council meeting will start right at about 3 minutes from now. Thank you so much. Call to order the meeting of the city council for the city of Wildwood for Monday, January 9, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Boland,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Nian,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here. All right, excellent. Welcome, everyone, and particularly to those of you in the public that are joining us here at City Hall this evening. For everyone who is comfortably able, if you'd please stand with me for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. The minutes are under the consent agenda. That takes us to public participation. I just want to mention a few words about that before we begin. Public comment is a valuable component of our meeting, and anyone who wishes to speak must indicate they would like to do that by completing a card or using the raise hand feature if you're joining us by internet, and hand the card if you're here to the city clerk who's to your left of the podium. When your name is called, please state your name and ward. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I'll let you know when that time limit is reached if needed. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses on the City Council page of our website. Finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited, and I want to thank everyone in advance for following these. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Mike Doster wishing to comment about Bill 2765.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, my name is Mike Doster. I'm the land use attorney on the petitioner's team with respect to the property that's before you in Bill number 2765. I just have a few brief remarks. The last time I appeared before you, we talked about the long timeline that existed with respect to this petition, which has been pending for over 7 years now. And during that 7 years, we have not been idle, and neither has staff been idle, neither has the Planning Commission or yourselves, the council. If you looked at the bill as presented by staff, there's a very important whereas clause on the second page, which says, with direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission, the petitioner modified the design concept on many occasions to address its concerns in regard to the use of this large tract of land in the town center area. And that is a true statement. I do not know as I stand here how many times the plan was revised, but it was. And the plan before you, we believe, complies with all applicable regulations. In addition, what's before you in this bill are numerous conditions, the longest list of conditions I've seen in any ordinance of its kind like this. And these conditions are verbatim the conditions that the Planning Commission recommended for approval, and we support them. So we ask that you have the first reading tonight so that we can proceed with this bill and the ultimate legislation. Mr. Stock is going to speak after me, and I know that he sent out to the city, and hopefully all of you have a copy of a document that explains what he's going to talk about. And I know your policies probably don't allow this, but I would like to cede some of my time to him if possible. It's very difficult for him to cover in 5 minutes the subject matter in that memo.
Unfortunately, Mr. Doster, that is not possible, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
All right, next speaker card, please. Thank you.
The next speaker card is George Stock wishing to comment about Bill number 2765.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. For the record, my name is George Stock. I'm with Stock and Associates Consulting Engineers, and here this evening on behalf of the reserve and the bill before you. Last time I was in front of you, I read a report which was basically about stormwater. I know that's first and foremost on many of your minds with regards to the reserve. After I read that and I thought about it, I thought maybe I need to come up here and make a few more remarks with a package in front of you. So hopefully you all have the package I sent. Basically, the first page outlines the stormwater management, which is a treatment train. It's very consistent with MSD's policies. I know there's been a lot of concern about MSD and whether they have the right policies in place. Again, this site develops a certain amount of runoff that's tributary to Bonham Creek. That amount of runoff needs to be managed in such a way to avoid any erosion or downstream adverse impacts. So the first step that we do under this plan is in the treatment plan is to disconnect roof drains and put in permeable soils, amended soils within the lots. That's not something that goes away. Those amended soils are tilled into the soils by the land developer and then sodded, and they're there forever. They don't go away. There's restrictions and ordinance and covenants within the subdivision that can be put in place that prohibits a property owner from piping their stormwater from their house and eliminating that overland flow. The second component is the bioretention basin, which causes the infiltration. It creates the pre-mimic or the mimicking of the pre-developed hydrology that once existed. That was implemented in 2011. The city's consultant had some questions about that. There's documentation that I provided in 2012 that MSD came out. I substantiated that documentation with some geotechnical investigations that were done on the site in 2015. That's included in your packet. And then third process is really the stormwater detention basins, and there's multiple basins throughout the site. So they're not just arbitrary, they're strategically located within the site to provide the stormwater management to attenuate the flows to create a large reduction in the runoff that currently exists on the site today. So as I go through this pamphlet, and I mentioned this before, relative to the reserve and the point of interest, the Bonham Creek is where it leaves the northeast corner of the property. We're 50.65 acres. Which is roughly 10.9% of the total acreage. So there's an aerial exhibit showing all the waters that are coming onto the reserve from basically the east to the south and to the north. And the reserve is a small percentage of that going. And the reserve is doing their job in order to sustain and protect the Bonham Creek. I mentioned a letter from 2012. That's really where the runoff reduction comes from. It comes from the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. And then we have the SCI reports that substantiate that condition that MSD stipulates for this particular property. I just have a couple excerpts that show you the type of clay soils and the bedrock that do exist on the site in order to relate. Then there's a little drawing, the treatment train. So what I had described in plan view, MSD provides a little sheet where they show the roof water. They show the roof water going from a downspout to the amended soils, and then they show it going to pervious pavement. In our application, it's the detached roof drains, downspouts onto the amended soils in the sod, and then to bioretention basins which flank Main Street. So we have those two sets of treatment from where the water leaves the street and then goes to the bioretention basin. So MSD looks at Bonham Creek, they've studied it and they've identified that it's a troubled creek. It's a creek that needs special attention given to it. So they apply those release rates that's in their little chart, which is different than many other watersheds within St. Louis County. So they're not ignoring it, they're recognizing, they're requiring us to really reduce the amount or the rate of runoff that goes to Bonham Creek through the development. This is a little table that it's titled Reserve at Wildwood. It has catchment areas A through F. Those are the detention basins highlighted in yellow. It's how many acres of land is broken down. So we don't take all this water and regionally run it to one basin at the bottom of the hill. We have intermittent basins spread out to be able to treat this water at the source. And then there was some question from the city's consultant about bypass. Did we take into account the bypass? That's water that just goes to Bonham Creek without being treated in this treatment train. And it's generally Bonham Creek. It's the area of Bonham Creek, and it's some areas around the peripheral. I've highlighted those in pink. So the next drawing that comes up is the areas, the tributary areas, the dry basins highlighted in yellow, A through F. And then pink are those areas I just described, which are Bonham Creek to the north, and then some properties to the south. Those just run directly to Bonham Creek without any treatment. But in the end, on our table, that you'll see is that we're allowed to release 12.66 CFS in the 2-year. We're at 12.24. And the original existing was 37 CFS. So it's a dramatic reduction. The 100-year released in 71.7 versus 196 CFS.
Mr.
Dramatic
Stock,
reduction.
how much more do you have?
1 minute. So the last document.
Can we make it 30 seconds?
30
I
seconds.
can't. Okay.
I apologize, Mayor. 30 seconds. The last document in there is a phase grading plan. So the approach to this, which was agreed upon at the Planning Commission and discussed, is that this site would not be clear cut and developed. It would be systematically developed with cuts and fills and restored and revegetated as we went along. So you see the 5 phases of development. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Debbie Gregory, wishing to comment about bill number 2765.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Gregory. I am representing the owners for the property that the reserve would like to build on. In the 1970s, my parents, Bernie and Vanita Slavic, purchased this property with Ken and Mary Dubois hoping to have money for their retirement in the future, for their kids, for their grandchildren, their future great-grandchildren. So it's been 50 years and we've not been able to do anything with it at this point. We aren't a large corporation that's trying to sell it. We're representing 22 families from our parents. 9 of the family members have passed away since we've begun this process. 1988, my husband, Frank Gregory, began the development process. He worked with Target, he worked with Deerbergs and several other home builders. 2009, the city of Wildwood changed our property from commercial designation to neighborhood general, which significantly reduced the value of our property. 2004 was the neighborhood improvement district. We were very strongly encouraged to participate. Supposed to add sewers and other infrastructure. So far, we've seen no benefit from this. We've put out to date $738,310. And in the next 2 years, we're expected to put out $86,860. We aren't independently wealthy families. We've all got kids, grandkids, and trying to put them through college and still paying off college debt and everything. So we, as owners, would strongly encourage you to vote yes on Bill 2765. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Francis Babb, wishing to comment about the solar recommendation at PNC.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Frances Babb, and I live at 2001 Kerrsdale Court in Clarkson Valley. My property borders the city of Wildwood on 2 sides. I am here to talk about what's brewing over in the Planning and Zoning Commission in the hopes that it dies before you ever see it. There is some suggestions that the conditional use permit process for solar energy systems be done away with, and that the current building code prohibiting solar from being visible from the street or an adjoining street be the law of the city. First of all, I think this is a really, really bad idea. I think that you have to be blind not to see the trend that's happening all across our country and across the world. I've submitted lots and lots of pictures to you all the last time I came about houses that have solar right on the face of them. You can see them plain as day. I have worked for the past 10 years with the state legislature. I would go at least once or twice a year and speak before the Energy Committee or the Commerce Committee. And I've knocked on so many doors, I couldn't possibly remember how many, telling the story of what happened to us in Clarkson Valley about our solar, in the hopes to pass a solar rights law protecting homeowners' rights to install solar panels when their HOA wants to prohibit them. So this proposed legislation will negate 10 years of very hard work on my part. And I think that if it moves forward, it's so unfair. It is unfair to more people than it benefits. What do you say to somebody whose house faces the wrong way? Sorry, no solar for you. Or if it faces, east and west, well, you can have a little bit, just not as much as you need. I think it would be more fair, although I strongly oppose this, to say no solar in our city at all, as opposed to say these people can have solar as much as they want and those people can't have any at all. And I can see kind of what's happening by attending some of these meetings. I know that your mayor is very much supportive of this change in legislation. And the people of the city have come before P&Z telling their thoughts on this matter. And 6-1, have been opposed to this proposed legislation. So what I'm asking you all is, are you going to listen to what your residents want? Or are you going to follow the kind of mentality that your mayor has? Who are you trying not to offend? So in conclusion, I hope that this proposed recommendation dies in planning and zoning, and I hope that you're fair to everybody in your city and treat them all the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is James Vanek wishing to comment about Old State Road.
Good evening, everyone. Apologize for arriving a little bit late for the business session. What I heard there was some really good stuff. Just having the conversation with the county is something that we have been urging the city of Wildwood to engage in. And I'm glad they showed up. I'm glad they passed along some information to you. And now we can have perhaps a more informed decision moving forward. I'm going to go with my original comments here. Many in my community have always viewed the roundabout at Ridge Road as a key improvement to making Old State safer. So you may be surprised by my following statement in that this is based on an incorrect assumption that we are only limited to one Old State improvement per year, which we are not. Okay. I would like to go on the record as stating the last week's selection of the roundabout would not have been my first choice to seek funding for by East West Gateway this year. The reason for this statement is that this is the last year the city and or county had a real opportunity to substantially increase the safety of Lower Old State. If you are unaware, safety application to East West Gateway can only use the past 5 years of accident history. This is the last year that Linda Giroux's death could have been used. Tragically, we may now have to wait until someone else is killed or seriously injured on this part of Old State to be in a favorable position to obtain funding from East West Gateway for significant improvements there. It's apparent that the method Wildwood currently uses to select which roads will be improved and which ones won't is not transparent. It has no provisions for public input, does not lend itself to public trust. Opportunities are squandered, decisions are rushed, key information is not gathered prior to the council making an educated and informed decision. For example, at the last Wildwood Administration of Public Works meeting, there was a lot of discussion and very few answers regarding how Ellisville and the county would view or support funding of the roundabout at Ridge Road. 1 month prior to the East-West Gateway deadline is not, I repeat, not the time to be asking these questions. Commitments such as these should be negotiated 3 or 4 months prior to the deadline. Council members should not be making decisions based upon likelihoods or statements like, I'm pretty sure they will. Similarly, what methods of application a project should be submitted should not be in doubt. The application type should be researched, supported, explained, and defended to the council and mayor prior to any final decisions being made. The current method of, this is the one I would recommend, is insufficient, and we as a city are capable of and deserve much better. Regardless of the decision tonight regarding the roundabout or other areas, every council member and the mayor should be tired of the current process and see the current system as enormously flawed. If you agree with me, please take a moment now, look inside your heart and take a personal vow that the insanity stops this year. This is the last year this happens. If not, I guarantee you we'll have the same discussion next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Jean Bedvig.
Good evening. Don't start my time yet.
Let me find my page. Jean Vedvig, 16709 Clayton Road, Wildwood, Missouri. Good evening, Mayor, Council. It's been a while since I've been here. And recently, while organizing some historical documents relating to Wildwood, I came across a letter from Pastor Green of the Antioch Baptist Church dated October 29th, 2012. And this letter was in some of the documents regarding the change of the name for Old Slate Road in 2012. I realize I'm coming to you on the second reading of this bill, but two comments from Pastor Green were so impactful and brought me back to the deep discussions of 2012. The history of slavery discounted the value of persons denying their humanity or assessing their humanity in some scheme of percentage of humanity. The objects of slavery were people without recourse. And this is Pastor Green from the Antioch Baptist Church. Please do not take those nameless people. Please do not take from those nameless people what little honor has accrued to them. Again, that was from Pastor Green at the Antioch Baptist Church. My friend Charles Branson, actually a friend to many here at City Hall, bought property on Old Slave Road in the 80s from Negley Calvin. Charlie was the first person to buy property on Old Slave Road. Negley Calvin lived nearby, close to the Coleman Plantation House. When I talked with Charlie about the name of the road, he explained that Negley named it Old Slave Road to honor the nameless souls buried on the road. For years, Charlie maintained the slave cemetery. When the vandalism started to happen, he let it grow over. People were coming and they actually took some of one of the monuments that was there. So we moved forward to 2012. When I listened to a person first speak about changing the name of the road, I was moved. The rationale she provided was, while filling out forms for her son's admission to college, she was embarrassed to put down Old Slave Road as the home address. That was a one-time statement. The campaign to change the name went on, but the rationale changed. I will say it actually was a comment that I commend her because it was so honest. I do not agree with it then, and if I was asked today, I would not agree with it. But I will say it was an honest statement. Needless to say, that was never the rationale going forward. All across our country, there are efforts being made to erase history. True, not all history is pleasant, but it is history. Dialing up the history is becoming acceptable. The fact that the name of the road references slaves may be uncomfortable, but these souls were not allowed to have proper names. They were not allowed to have headstones. You will find a plain unmarked stone near the creek on Old Slate Road. The slaves wanted to be buried near water so as to have their spirit lifted. I'm not here to diminish the life and service of Elijah Madison. Any recognition we can provide is honorable. At the same time, to take away any recognition from the nameless souls is disappointing. Did you know this is the only road in the United States named Old Slave Road? If you decide you are going to change the name of the road to honor Elijah Madison, then why not name the road Elijah Madison? This would lead to clarity so the road could not be confused to be named after the fourth president, James Madison, who did own 100 slaves and sold them for profit. A suggestion would be to let the road name remain the same. And if history makes you, I'm almost done.
How
here.
much more do you have, Ms. Vedvik?
About 15 seconds.
Okay, perfect.
Remark.
Okay.
If history makes you that uncomfortable, then don't whitewash the change to Madison Valley. Change it to the person you say you want to honor, Elijah Madison Road. It's something to think about. And I asked for my comments and Pastor Green's letter to be included in the meeting minutes record. Is that possible, sir?
It's ultimately up to the council.
Okay, I would ask the council. I have a written copy for the clerk, and I have a copy of Pastor Green's letter. If anyone would care to get a
So
copy.
if you want to hand those to the clerk, we'll
Yes,
take it
sir.
from there. Thank you, Ms. Vedvik.
Okay.
Next
you.
speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Ed Marshall wishing to comment about city charter revisions.
Mine might be history too, but not, I remember those meetings that Gene's talking about. That did go on for a long time. My only question is tonight I see that there's an ordinance referring to changing the city charter. And I guess I've had either the fortunate or unfortunate part of doing that twice with my service with the city. And the wording in the charter is laid out for the Charter Commission, and Councilmember Dodwell would know. Every one of those articles are read and discussed as to why is it in there, how should things be done that way, and how do you keep the control in the hands of the 16 city council members that are elected to do that. It just, and I don't know, I'm sure you have all the detail. There are 3 ways to change a charter, which the council can do that. But to do it so quickly, you could actually set up a charter commission review. You can have a petition come from the public, or the council can agree to do that. You also have the time period as to when it can go to the ballot. And so you don't really, unless maybe tonight, and I'll look forward to the discussion about what the provisions are, unless you know the old charter, the new wording just kind of eliminates some of the issues that might have been in there. But I just question the reason that if the charter is our mini constitution and we're driving the city around the constitution of the city or the charter, and we have to review it every 10 years. I just question, there are a lot of things that should be put together to say the next commission, which no later than, and you guys could do it next week if you wanted, but there's a very defined time period. They have 6 months to do it. They have to get it in. It cannot be submitted 2 months before an election, and it cannot be submitted 6 months prior to that. So there's some real guidelines in there. I just, as I've tried to read through it, and I know you probably have all the backup on it, but to a casual onlooker, that seems to be missing. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speaker cards, Ms. Eldridge?
No speaker cards, but someone does have their
I
hand
saw that. Yes, we do. So we have Mr. Tom Downey, who has raised his hand on the Zoom feature here. So can you please promote him, Travis? Okay, Mr. Downey, welcome. I want to make sure before you start that you heard the information I provided as to public participation. Did you hear that earlier?
I've been here since the beginning. I only missed when I got transitioned to be made a panelist. I missed about 30 seconds.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead then.
I've spoken before you a month ago, and I've spoken before the planning and zoning. So I think, I want to speak to you about the solar decisions you have in front of you. I don't want to repeat what I've already said or repeat what Francis Babb has said today and before, but I would like to let you know about a few things that motivate me, and hopefully some of them will motivate you. In terms of the environment, which we all think about with solar, I don't know how many of you are familiar with vehicle to home charging. I've got an electric car, and I suppose probably some of you have electric cars, and we probably felt pretty good when we first got them that we were doing something good for the environment, until we realized that to use the car, we had to go home and plug the car in. And in Missouri, most of the electricity comes from burning coal. So instead of the car being propelled by gasoline, it's now propelled by coal. And so you can see why a lot of us who buy electric cars pretty soon come to the conclusion that we'd like to have solar panels on our roof, which is just about the only way that you can propel your car in a green fashion. So we all know about that. What you might not know about is just last year, Nissan has approved any Nissan electric car. You will not void the battery if you power your home from your Nissan car. In addition, Ford Motor Company allows you to power your home from the new Ford F-150 truck. And General Motors has partnered with SunPower, a solar panel installer, so that when you buy your General Motors electric car, you can also buy solar panels for your roof to charge the car. I hope you see, if you weren't aware of this vehicle to home charging, I hope you see this. In terms of the economy, the three largest producers of oil in the world, and all of us export them, is United States, Saudi Arabia, and Russia. If we adopt more solar in Wildwood and elsewhere, we will use less fossil fuel. We will have more oil to export. It will help our economy. It will help me save money on my electric bills. It will save money for Wildwood, and it will help the US economy by allowing us to export more oil. That will also lower the demand for oil worldwide. It will lower the price, and it will hurt people like Vladimir Putin, who uses the money he makes selling fossil fuel to the rest of the world to kill his neighbors. All of us have something we can do about that. Every time you have a choice to vote, whether to allow someone like me to put solar on my roof, or whether to vote to increase restrictions on solar in Wildwood, I would ask you, among all these other reasons, think about the people in Ukraine. If we all work together, we can put people like Putin to rest, and we can save the people of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we don't have anyone else. Travis, is that correct? Okay, and no more speaker cards. All right, I want to thank each one of you this evening who spoke during public participation for being part of our meeting. Moving next to mayor appointments, there's one, it's on the consent agenda. That takes us to the public hearings, and we have three. The first is PZ 10-22, Mr. Vintage.
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, could the city clerk read the request into the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please read that, Ms. Eldridge. Thank you, Joe.
PZ 10-22, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider potential changes to Chapter 420 subdivision and development regulations of the City of Wildwood's Code of Ordinances for the purposes of evaluating the current time frame for recording an approved record plat, which is no more than 60 days after final action by the City Council.
Thank you. And now, Joe, do you have anything you want to mention relative to PZ 10-22?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be very brief. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has forwarded to you a favorable recommendation regarding this change. The change would increase the required time frame for recording a record plat acted upon by City Council from 60 days to 120 days. This is premised on COVID-19 and what the pandemic has done, but more importantly, many banks are out of state now, and lien holders are required to sign the record plat. So this is a convenience to all parties. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'm available for any comments or questions, and at the conclusion of those comments and questions, the department would respectfully request authorization to prepare the legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Well, I'm sorry, any speaker cards on the matter? Okay, any questions for Joe? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Councilor Ottenberg. Okay, with having legislation prepared, is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Rambo. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry, Mr. Bros, Councilmember Bros. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. That takes us next to PZ 14-22. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read it?
PZ 14-22, 18443 Rieger Road, care of Kevin Calzada, 18443 Rieger Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005. A request for a change in zoning from the PS Park and Scenic District to the NU Non-Urban Residence District upon a parcel of ground that is 4.36 acres in size, which is located on the north side of Rieger Road, west of its intersection with Shiloh Valley Drive. Street address 18443 Rieger Road, St. Louis County, locator number 22X440070. The property was previously part of Badler State Park, but was sold into private ownership by the state of Missouri. Such sale and now the property's use for residential purposes necessitates the request for zoning change to address its legal but non-conforming status.
Thank you, Mr. Benich. Anything you want to mention relative to that?
Again, yes, Mr. Mayor, and I will be hopefully even briefer on this particular item. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has forwarded to you for consideration tonight a favorable report regarding this matter. The matter is for a change in zoning to eliminate a legal but non-conforming use of the property, which is a single-family dwelling. As is mentioned in the advertisement, the state of Missouri sold this property and somehow residents got built in the Park and Scenic District. This would change that and make the zoning consistent with the master plan of the city and allow the property owner to proceed forward with improvements to it. At the conclusion of any questions or comments, the department would respectfully request again the authorization to prepare the needed legislation for the zoning change. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Benich, going forward, we've added a new section to our agenda for first readings that follow hearings with a favorable recommendation to go ahead and get those on the agenda for first reading at this time to expedite that. So if we can please do that going forward, that would be great.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll have it from this point forward, meaning at the February meeting, we'll have those things ready. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I know it's a change in course, so that's all right. We'll get there. I appreciate it. Okay, any speaker cards on this issue? All right. Any questions for Joe by any member of the council or a motion? Councilmember Clark?
I move that we go ahead with legislation on this as recommended.
Okay, we have a motion to proceed with legislation. This concerns Ward 1. Is there a second to the motion to proceed with the drafting of legislation? Seconded by Councilmember Brost. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion to proceed with the drafting of legislation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to the last public hearing, liquor license application for BP 2478 LLC. Would you please read it, Ms. Eldridge?
Liquor license application for BP 2478 LLC, which is located at 2400 Highway 109.
Thank you. Mr. Benich, anything you want to mention relative to this item?
Just a couple of points, Mr. Mayor, with your permission. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, this particular BP Amico is located on the southeast corner of Route 100, Route 109. It has been at that location for many, many years. There is now a change in ownership, and the new owner is requesting a liquor license. The planning department, along with the county police department, have reviewed the application and found it acceptable. So tonight, the department is respectfully requesting the liquor license application be approved by City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any speaker cards on the matter? Any questions for Joe or any comments? And Joe, what are you asking the council to do, if anything, this evening?
To approve the liquor license application as submitted and endorsed by the Department of Planning and the Police Department.
Gotcha. And thank you so much. And this is Ward 8. Is there a motion? Councilmember Galani?
I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and approve the liquor license as proposed by the planning and zoning.
And seconded by Councilmember Garitano. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to our second readings. The first is Bill 2748. And councilors, I just want to mention, as you know, in past meetings recently, we've had the ability to do some of these in unison to expedite the meeting. I did not see, as I went through the agenda, much ability to do that this evening. So we'll be doing each one of these one by one, like the old time. All right. And fair enough. So Bill 2748 is before the council for final passage. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? made by Councilmember Edens. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Clark. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2748.
Bill number 2748, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an agreement on behalf of the city of Wildwood with MyGov LLC to purchase and implement a web-based software application which will track, manage, and automate various essential activities of the Departments of Public Works and Planning and Parks. Second reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything further to add relative to Bill 2748?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Brown may have a comment or two. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Director Brown, do you have anything you want to mention relative to the bill?
Thank you, Mayor Mullen. I don't have anything additional. This is certainly software that both departments are very excited about implementing, and I think will be a very large part of our operations in the future, helping us to be efficient and cost effective in the way we approach our work on a daily basis. So with that, I'm available for any questions, unless Mr. Vunich has something he'd like to say.
Any questions by any member of the council for Director Brown? Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, very quickly. I strongly. I have my thing on. I strongly support this and expect that you guys have done a great job selecting the software. Just my own curiosity kind of drives me to ask how I can get a look at this. I'm plan to vote yes, but I'd like to understand what we're getting. Is that is there a facility for doing that, or a website or something like that we can go to?
I think the director can probably get an email to you and copy everyone on it with that information.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine. Great.
Is that fair enough?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
Councilmember Dodwell.
There was no backup. Go to the website.
We can go to the website, but I'm not certain which components we're purchasing. So I'd kind of like to have a better handle on what tools are our staff getting to be able to make their jobs easier.
Are you comfortable with the vote occurring this evening, however?
I think I'll be okay with it, but I'd
Okay.
like a few more details.
Okay. All right. So Rick, if you could please get that to everyone, that'd be great. All right, seeing no further questions or discussion, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2748.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano, Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino, Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Okay, so the bill has passed. Takes us to Bill 2749A. There's actually an amendment that's been posted and was provided to you that came out of, I believe, Admin Public Works. It's labeled Bill 2749B. So the first thing I would ask is to get this moving forward, if there could be someone to make an amendment, a motion to amend so that that becomes the bill, assuming you agree with that becoming the bill. And then we can have discussion about that. Councilmember Clark.
I would move to amend the bill.
With
To-
substitution of bill as indicated in Bill 2749B, is that
B.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Councilmember Jaxi. Any discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to amend the bill as indicated, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so now what is before the council is Bill 2749B, and it is before the council for final passage. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark. Seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All in favor of the motion for second reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2749B.
Bill number 2749B, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the current name of Old Slave Road located on Wild Horse Creek Road to be hereinafter renamed and known as Madison Valley.
Mr. Brown, do you have anything further you want to add relative to this?
Mayor, I will just briefly mention that the change that was added in Public Works Committee was that the plaque would be installed by the end of this calendar year, and that's in the bill in section 2.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Rick or any comments? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2749B.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino, Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The bill has passed. Moving next into first readings, Bill 2765 is before the council for first reading, and it concerns Ward 1. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor of the motion for first reading of the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2765 for the first time.
Bill number 2765, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, endorsing and ratifying the recommended changes to the street network map of the town center plan and authorizing a change in the zoning district designations from the C8 Planned Commercial District and the R6A 3,000 square foot residence district with the Planned Environment Unit PEU to the amended C8 Planned Commercial District and the R3 10,000 square foot residence district with the Planned Residential Development Overlay District PRD for a tract of land 50.7 acres in size located on the west side of State Route 109 north of Manchester Road to be used for no more than 132 single-family detached dwellings on individual lots, associated common ground spaces, required public space areas, and a minimum of one commercial outlot fronting State Route 109. First reading.
Thank you. I know this was a subject of public hearing at the last meeting. We had a lot of discussion about this. Joe, do you have anything you want to mention relative to Bill 2765?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, but certainly the department's available for any questions or comments.
Okay, Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes, I would like to propose, if this is appropriate, to have a second reading of Bill 2765 tonight.
Let's see what happens with the first and we'll go from there. All right, thank you though. Councilmember Edens.
I was just going to say I would not support a second reading tonight. I do appreciate the Development Corporation sending an email with more information today. But again, that came in today, this afternoon, and I had a cursory look, but didn't get the chance to review that in the detail that I'd like. It wasn't made available.
We don't have a motion for second reading on the floor yet, so it may not even be made.
Perfect. So then I'll just continue with the rest of my comments that are more germane. But at least I got that out there, so we don't have to worry about that later. And I do want to let the owners of the property or those representing the collective group know that we do appreciate you coming to speak. It's good to put a face on something sometimes because the decisions that we make affect real people, but just want you to understand too, we cannot make legal decisions based on relating to you on a compassionate level, right? I can't treat somebody that could potentially have been a multimillionaire with a nasty Twitter account any differently than somebody that just wants money to pass on and retire with or pass on to family. So I understand what you're saying, but I can't take that into a legal planning and zoning consideration, but I do appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions relative to Bill 2765? Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, I agree with Lauren on every point. We just got the stock report about 2 hours before the meeting and haven't had a chance to look at it. I do want to say that this started out as Ackerley Place and it changed to the reserve, partly to the benefit of the developers, as I understand it, to give them relief from a topology problem associated with having rear entry garages. And so the clock sort of started in my mind in October of 2020 with the hearing.
stormwater retention, some aesthetics, including driveway lengths and mundane things like that. And the trees and tree preservation were the big three concerns that many of us had. And then COVID hit. And subsequently, the developer has addressed the stormwater concerns as well as we probably can expect. They did not address the aesthetics and the trees and tree preservation. They just kind of said, "Nah, we're good." And I don't think that's an appropriate response, and I don't think they should receive relief from us just because it's been a long time. So to the folks that own the property, the Slavics, I'm in exactly the same boat. My family's been here for generations. I have about the same amount of property. It was devalued in the course of Wildwood's development, and so I'm no longer a multimillionaire because of my land holdings. And so I do feel that pain, but we have to, as Lauren said, we have to do the right thing. And my personal belief is, had the developers come with a more reasonable approach that reduced the housing density and so forth on your property, you would already be cashing in. So we're trying to get them to do it right. And it may not take much longer, but that's the best I can offer you. So I apologize on a personal level for dragging this out, but we needed to get it right. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Galani?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment because I keep hearing other council members bring up the term doing it right, and we're trying to make sure they do it right. The timeline, like I mentioned last meeting, is embarrassing from our standpoint. This has been going on for quite some time, and we keep continuing to seemingly move the goalposts on these folks, and they've spent a lot of money and a lot of time acquiescing to our demands and our requests. And when we talk about doing it right, I think right is by way of what ordinances and guidelines we have in place today. If there's concerns out there from council members based on other things that are beyond the scope of those current guidelines and ordinances we have in place, then by all means, we can have a conversation and we can address that by passing new guidelines and adjusting our ordinances to affect future developments. But using this as a case study to legislate from the bench over here, as we go through the process and hold them accountable for what we'd like to see happen and a wish list of things that we wish were there, is not appropriate and not within our scope of our jobs and our duties, like I mentioned last time. So, I mean, to the gentleman representing the developer that was up there earlier, the planning and zoning department laid out a list of however many hundred conditions that were out there, and they've agreed to every single one of them and support every single one of them. So I sit back and I ask, what exactly is it that we're holding back or expecting to have them change or reduce number of lots or whatever it is? The bottom line is, it seems like they've agreed to the terms that we've asked them to agree to, and this has gone on for far too long. And I would just advocate that we move past this and get it done. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the bill has been read, Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to directly on that point, the developers took great liberties with the grand tree designations and the tree preservation plan generally. They have not moved from that position, so it's not like we're moving the goalposts. They just haven't moved from their position over the last couple of years. They have moved on from their position on the stormwater retention. I think this is as good as we're likely to get. So I'm happy with that. The aesthetics of a 3-in-1 slope into sodded basins that are classified as common ground, as though there'll be Frisbee games out there, is not. It may not be appropriate, but it's nothing that we can affect. The aesthetics, though, we asked last time, maybe the time before, for elevation drawings that reflected reality, because the ones that I've seen, and those haven't come in, because the ones I've seen show decades old trees with the top of the house just peeking out behind them. that won't happen in my lifetime, and we deserve to know just exactly what we're going to be looking at from Highway 100 and 109 before it's too late and before this happens. And so I'm looking for just good faith responses from the developer on the other main issues that we brought up based on the hearing that we had 3 years ago. So the timeline is an embarrassment, but more than half of that was circumstances beyond our control, and COVID slowed down the 3 years since the 10/20 hearing. So it's really only been a year plus COVID, let's say. I don't think that's I don't think it's too much to ask for the things that we originally identified as problems in 10/20 to be addressed. So that's it.
So this bill has only been read once. As you know, debate cannot occur until after it's been read twice. That may or may not happen this evening. Been a little liberal with the discussion here, but yeah. So, and you needed to respond, I think, to that. But if there's any informational questions or something like that, this is the time for that. Otherwise, debate would be after a second reading that occurs. Councilmember Fleischer.
You can tell me if this is informational. I guess my question is the Grand Trees ordinance that Dr. Rambo is talking about, are they not meeting the city's guidelines on Grand Trees, or are they not meeting Dr. Rambo's guidelines on Grand Trees? I guess that's my question.
And that is in order. Mr. Benich, if you could please I think that's a yes or no. So if you could succinctly let us know whether the city's ordinances are being complied with by this proposed development as it's presented to the council this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I'll do it as quickly as I can. 2 different arborists from Davie Resource Group said they are in compliance.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
And you'll have to tell me if this is germane as well, but can we not, if this goes through, can we not, and we'd have a second reading and everything, can't we, isn't there a site development plan that we can come back and do all of these details and really hold them to the fire to what we're asking for at that time? I just look at it and my heart does go out to them also, and hopefully, I can keep it, my emotions out of it, but to think about what they have done for the city by paying this NID back, and the benefits that we have gotten from that area with the college and the Y and everybody using what they are they've brought in.
Yeah.
I just think that does sway my thought about it a lot, and that we can come back with a site development plan.
So the site development plan is an administrative function that would therefore be done administratively, I believe, by our city team rather than the council. Is that correct? City Attorney Young.
I'll ask Joe to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So it would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which this council has a representative on, and I sit on as well, and would be happy to take your comments there. So any other?
I truly don't think this is a debate.
That's okay.
I was disappointed in Mr. Vunich's response because, in fact, the arborists did say that, yeah, the count is about right, but these are also grand trees. It just depends on the interpretation. And they were adamant that their interpretation was closer to being legitimate interpretation and the one that was used for the 10 trees. Moreover, and even more importantly, the trees standing by themselves in basins are not going to survive. So it's really an exercise in futility, and it's just a way to throw us a sop. The way to do it as recommended by the arborist.
So I think it's getting into debate, Councilor
Okay,
Rambo.
so there was supposed to be not 10 isolated trees. It's supposed to be some surrounding plantings that protect those trees. And so I feel kind of embarrassed because like I'm being a jerk up here about the tree count. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm just trying to get to what the arborists have actually insisted we try to do. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Bartoni.
Thank you. And I've got a question also. So the site development plan goes to planning and zoning. That comes back to us as a resolution, or how does that come back to us, or
does it?
Or does it? Yeah.
City Attorney.
I don't believe it comes back to you, except it may be as a receive and file.
It's a receive and file then.
And
Okay.
then to follow up on Councilmember Bartoni's question, though, if as with other receipt files, the council saw something in it, as it does occasionally, that it wants to, in other words, take up and put in its own lap to discuss, is that one of them that legally could be done?
I don't believe so, as I believe the rules are explicit in terms of who approves them, but I can double check that in advance of the next meeting.
Okay, that was just something that came up while I was wanting to say something else. I mean, I'm not speaking necessarily for or against this, but I think since we have talked about this for so long, I can appreciate the email that Mr. Stock sent us, but a 17-page document getting a couple hours before here. I just, as important as this is, I just wish I had more time to read that and just to digest it and give it the proper respect that it deserves. So that's just the only reason I won't be in favor of the second reading. I'm not opposed to the project. I just want to read that in detail. And I think that it's fair to all parties that we read that in detail.
Yep. Okay. So the bill has been read once. If there is no motion for a second reading, we'll move to the next bill. If someone wants to make a motion for a second reading, we can take it. Councilor Ottenberg.
So I'd still like to repeat request for a second reading of this bill tonight for all the reasons that Councilmember Galani mentioned. This project has been discussed on numerous occasions, and I think it's just time for us to move forward with this.
Okay. Is there a second for the motion for second reading? Seconded by Councilmember Bertolino. This will be a 2/3 vote. As you know, when we read bills twice in one evening, we have a supermajority requirement to do that. And given the discussion we've had and seeing no other hands, we'll do I'm sorry, Councilmember Flasher.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
So if the second reading doesn't get approved tonight, there's still a second reading the next meeting.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Well, if it's approved for second reading at the next meeting, there will be. It'll be on the I think your question I interpret was, will it be on the agenda at the next meeting for a second reading? And it will be, but it would need a.
Second reading happens time it gets rejected, then it's that. If the second reading gets approved and then we reject the second reading, like we don't pass it, then that's the end of the bill.
So you would need to vote against the bill after. So
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
yeah. So if the second.
Not saying I'm gonna do
Just
that.
1 second, just 1 second. So whether the second reading, if the second reading for tonight occurs
Yeah.
or at the next meeting, the issue would be if it is whether the bill actually passes,
Yeah.
whether it's read now this evening or at the next meeting, but not as to the motion for the second reading.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for the questions because it can get a little complicated. Okay. We're going to do a roll call vote on the motion for second reading. Please call the roll. This is a motion for second reading of Bill 2765. Takes a 2/3 majority. A yes vote is to have a second reading this evening.
Councilmember Nian,
No.
Councilmember Farmer,
No.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
No.
Councilmember Rambo,
No.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano.
No.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
No.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
No.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
No.
Councilmember Bartoni.
No.
I believe the motion fails for second reading. Okay, so the bill will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. Moving next.
Point of information.
Yes, sure.
I'm just curious. Is there, now may not be the time, but I would like to request that the developer provide us with those elevations that they were committed to providing us a month or so ago.
Yeah, if there's no objection, we'll have the city administrator send an email to them asking them to do that. And when they get them, if they do, they'll forward them to all of us.
Great.
If
Thank
there's no objection to that. All right, seeing none, that's what we'll do. Councilmember Bartoni.
And if they could do that before the day of the meeting.
As soon as possible would be the intent. Yep. Thank you for that. All right, moving next to Bill 2766. It's for the before the council, also for first reading. It concerns Ward 8. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Garetano, seconded by Councilmember Ward 8, seconded by Councilmember Galani. All in favor of the motion for first reading of the bill 2766, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2766.
Bill number 2766, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing a change in the zoning district designation of a 0.72 acre property located on the east side of Etherton Road, north of its intersection with Crestview Drive, from the NU non-urban residence district to the R3 10,000 square foot residence district. First reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2766?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, but if there are any questions or comments from city council, I'll be glad to try to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And my understanding from the city clerk earlier today is that you would not have an objection to a second reading on this bill if someone wanted to make that motion. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Any interest in making a motion for a second reading on the part of anyone?
I do have a question.
Councilor Garetano.
I mean, I'm a big believer in just following the process, especially with rezonings. So, I mean, is there anything that's an unusual circumstance or a request why we would do a second reading? Or if not, can we just follow the process and do the second reading at the next meeting?
Mr. Bennett, any urgency or can it wait?
It can certainly wait, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, there's your answer. All right, and seeing no motion for second reading, that's what we'll do. All right, that takes us to Bill 2767. It's before the council for first reading, and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilor McCutcheon, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All in favor of the motion for first reading of the bill, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2767 for the first time.
Bill number 2767, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, submitting to the qualified voters of the city at the general municipal election to be held in the city on April 4th, 2023, a proposed amendment to subsection B of section 5.4 of the charter of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, as it relates to the appointment and removal of city employees and administrative officers. First reading.
Thank you. And as the proponent or the person who put this here, I just want to mention a couple of comments about it. So this, as you know, I put mentioned in my, I think, December 19th mayor's report a few weeks ago, and gave several reasons as to why I thought this was important for the city. Those have been put in a memo that was attached earlier today with this bill. The bill originally, or my concept originally, which did not include the language in consultation with the council, went before the admin PW committee a few days ago. And there were a couple of people absent, and I know there was one member who had to leave before this came up. But regardless of that, after the meeting, I reached out and talked with a couple of people to get an idea of what might, be their concerns and so forth. And out of that discussion, two changes occurred, and I think it makes the bill much better. One is that this would occur, this being the city administrator's decision-making capacity, only in consultation with the city council, number one. And number two, it would not take effect until January 1 of 2024, which will remove, this has never been, in my mind, a positional, or I'm sorry, an individual issue. It's a structural issue. So I just want to give you that information, and I want to thank each council member that has been involved in making this a better version. Last thing I want to mention, speaking of second reading, so the reason in terms of timing that this is here this evening, frankly, mostly is because there is a deadline at the end of this month, January 24th, for items to be placed on the ballot with St. Louis County Board of Elections, for them to be, to be filed with Board of Elections, St. Louis County, for them to be, the bill to be actually placed on the ballot in April. So if you are so inclined, I would ask that we have a motion and do a second reading on this so that we can accomplish that, assuming you're comfortable with the language. Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion that we have a second reading of Bill 2767 tonight.
Okay, there is a motion for a second reading. Is there a second to the motion for second reading of the bill? Maybe Councilmember Hopper, this. We did the first reading. Yeah, we did. I got it right this time. But thank you for checking me, because sometimes I don't. All right. So we have a motion and a second for a second reading. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a 2/3 vote. We'll try a voice vote, see where that goes. All in favor of a motion for second reading of Bill 2767, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. Okay, show of hands opposed. Flasher, Rambo, Bartoni, and Edens, are you opposed? Okay, we'll get to that. So just talk. So we have 3 opposed. Was that right? Bartoni, Rambo, and Flasher.
May I ask a question though?
Sure.
Procedural question. If this doesn't make it on the April ballot, if it makes it on the November ballot and it's approved, can it be affected by?
I don't think it can be on the November ballot.
Oh, okay. So this is it for a year if you don't. I'm sorry. I'm well, my vote doesn't matter. So. Okay.
All right. So we have 3, I think, Councilmember Bartoni, Councilmember Flasher, and Councilmember Rambo that were opposed to second reading. We have a super majority. And I'm sorry, we have 1 abstention. Councilor Edens, we still have a super majority. So please read the bill. We have that. Please read the bill a second time. Councilmember or City Clerk Eldridge.
Bill number 2767, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, submitting to the qualified voters of the city at the general municipal election to be held in the city on April 4th, 2023. A proposed amendment to subsection B of section 5.4 of the charter of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, as it relates to the appointment and removal of city employees and administrative officers. Second reading.
Thank you. And I don't have anything further to add, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Councilmember Bertolino.
Just so we don't stumble over any procedural things, John, question to you at the admin public works, that committee did say they wanted to postpone decision on this. But
make it move.
I don't know if we did that correctly or not. Is there any problem at all procedurally in getting this on the agenda tonight and getting it voted on?
No, sir.
Good. Okay.
Councilor Edens.
Yeah, we were on that committee and we were at the meeting, and so I was pretty surprised to see this on here because I had voted to postpone this because I didn't see where the fire was and I was concerned that we were rushing it. That's kind of substantiated by the second whereas clause. If you look, I think we used an old template. It's because if you notice, it says the proposed amendment to the city charter to provide for start times for regular meetings for city council. So no matter where this goes tonight, that needs to be an editorial change on that whereas clause. So there's some other changes that I would be interested in making as well, because we didn't have any language in front of us at admin and public works. We just had, kind of a broader idea, right? So I understand that that there's a date on this, but for example, I would want to look more at what I know there's the city handbook for employees, but we haven't discussed the language in that. So there might be some more language that we could add specifically to outline the review process for employees in this amendment, but that's doing the work here here at the council level on the fly and not in the committee. And we have had a city founded to be different. I listened very carefully to what Councilmember Bertolino said during that committee meeting about the way we were founded, the philosophy behind it, and why things were made. So to get me to a level where I'm comfortable to change it, after it's been that way for what, 26 years, I want to be able to discuss it at a committee level and not have something rushed at a council level. So I'd love to refer back to admin and public works.
So you have a motion to refer back to admin Public Works, seconded by Councilor Bartoni. Any discussion on the motion to refer? Councilor Bartoni?
So I guess what I'm missing here is just the urgency. I mean, I understand that if we have to vote on it today to get it on the April ballot, but I don't understand the urgency to get it on the April ballot. As you know, Mr. Marshall mentioned earlier, you know, the charter, that's our constitution. It's a very important document, and changing it needs to be taken very seriously. And every 10 years, we put together a charter review committee. They thoroughly, you know, they in detail go through the entire charter. It's made up of Wildwood residents. If I'm not mistaken, Katie, I think you were on the first one before you were on council. So you know the detail of everything that goes on there. They read every word. They discuss every amendment. There's a lot of resident input. The committee takes months and months to make these changes. I think, you know, Mr. Marshall said it's like a 6-month process. So I don't understand why we are hurrying through this. And this needs to be discussed very thoroughly because it is very important and because it is very serious. Like was mentioned, you know, this is not, the city was founded, and doesn't mean that, you know, everything's perfect, but you know, the city foundation was built on a very strong council. That's why there's 16 people up here. There's not 8 and there's not 4. And this authority was never intended to be to the city administrator. It was our authority, and that's our position. And it's, you know, kind of getting a possibility that gets taken away from us. You know, I guess, like I'm saying, you know, the fact that the admin Public Work voted to postpone it, and I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know exactly how the discussion went, but, you know, for this to kind of come to us without committee discussion and without resident input and without the thoroughness that this deserves, I look at this as a slap in the face to the council, and it's definitely a slap in the face to the admin and Public Works Committee. You're saying, like, whatever you guys would decided, well, we're going around you. And we talk a lot about the importance of committees here, and you know, Mayor Boland talks a lot. That's committee work. That's committee work. Let them figure it out. That's not for us here. And this isn't a perfect example of that. And this definitely needs to be referred back to admin Public Works. It needs to be thoroughly discussed. There needs to be plenty of input from the public, a public hearing. And I don't think the council cannot, nor they should not allow this to go through tonight.
On motion to refer, Councilor Dodwell.
Can I speak
On the motion, is it on the motion?
on the motion to refer? As far as the motion to refer back, I guess I would request that it not go back. And can I give my reason why?
Sure, that's.
Thank you. Just double checking here.
That's all right.
While I understand the concern of the committee, and I'm glad that Mr. Marshall had brought up the review process, we're not going to have another review process for what, 8 years?
Unless one is called, that's correct.
So that's a concern of mine. Concern number 2. Currently, we have individuals that are in directorship roles that have the ability to influence decisions made by council, have the ability to represent themselves, and in some cases the city, or they have tried to do that. With a different perspective than either the city charter currently has or the city council has advised. And I guess I'm a little concerned that that ability to have the power of input for the directorships maybe more than we should have done to begin with. And I don't know that I want to wait until 8 years from now to do some of that cleanup.
Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, I oppose it to being referred to a committee for a couple reasons. One, the residents end up deciding this issue. It's not necessarily for council to decide. We put things before the residents and let them decide. And secondly, to me, this resolves some confliction within the charter. We're not supposed to direct staff. We're not supposed to direct the city administrator. It's a city administrator's position to hire, fire, whatever. It's not council's. Now, we can agree with it. We can disagree with it. And that's what this says, is give consent. So it's really not in our purview to compete, conflict, disapprove of what the city administrator is doing as far as staff. If we do that, if we disagree or we disapprove, then there's another option that we can come forth with regarding the city administrator. So to me, reading the charter, this actually solves a conflict in there. And I noticed the conflict, or felt like there was conflict before this ever came forward. I was happy to see this because I think it resolves that issue.
So the motion on the floor is to refer, Councilor Garetano on the motion to refer.
Yeah, my comments are similar to Councilmember McCutcheon's in that I'm against referring to it. I thought long and hard about this here, and the reason why I feel that this is appropriate at this time is we are embarking right now on the search and eventual hiring of a city administrator. And I think the way the language is today, it second guesses the authority of the city administrator. For someone coming new into that, I'd like to have that cleared up so that they don't have to start this role with this type of authority here, that these decisions have to be made by the council. I like the modification and the improvement in there about in consultation with the council. I think it's important that there is consultation, but you're hiring someone and you're going to pay them a good salary. There has to be a level of trust. It's the way the voters trust us to represent them. I think we have to place some trust with the city administrator and ultimately hold the city administrator accountable. So if there is an error or something, then we hold the city administrator responsible for that. The other thing too, and I think this was a really good valid point, is that we're not involved in everyday operations of the city. We're not involved in all the discussions. There's too much, and we have to place that trust on the city administrator to do that job. If we're going to have this responsibility on us, then we have to be in every conversation. We have to be in every review. We have to be in every hiring decision or any other type of conversation there. And we're not. And so I think we have to align the responsibility with that trust that we place in the city administrator.
Councilor Clark on the motion to refer.
Motion to refer, and a lot of what I was going to say, Councilmember Garetano just said, but I just wanted to make it clear that I made that motion in the Admin Public Works Committee because I saw that at the time we weren't focused on all of the details that surrounded, like Joe had just mentioned. So I knew that I didn't want it to die because I see this as a good step forward in clearing up some things and doing it before the new city administrator gets here. So he starts with the plan that he's going to go forward with instead of changing something in the middle. The person who's responsible for a person for an employee should be the one with the authority over that employee and who ultimately answers to us in the long run.
Okay. On the motion to refer. Councilor Galani.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I won't re-echo the sentiments of Councilmember McCutcheon, Dotto, Garetano, and Clark, but I agree. I'm against referring it. I think we had a vote to it, but I think Councilmember McCutcheon brought it up perfectly in the sense that we aren't deciding anything. We aren't making a change to the charter. We're giving it in the hands of our residents to make that decision for themselves. And I also applaud the fact that constantly you see government bodies looking to build their power and what they're in control of and what they have a say so in. I think it's great when a body is able to say, we don't need to have our hands in this, and we trust the city administrator that we're going to bring in and have in this position to manage their directors and manage their staff and give them that authority to do so. So I think it's a great move, and I don't want to refer.
On the motion to refer, Councilmember Rottenberg.
Yes, I'm against. Because I think what this bill does is it gives the residents of the city the opportunity to put something in place that's very similar to what happens commonly in the private sector, where you have to trust a manager to make the best decisions regarding those he hires and to move his particular division, company, what have you, forward. It's a very efficient way of doing things that that we can replicate here.
Okay. So anything new on the motion to refer? Okay, Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, there's a strong case for this. It feels rushed. Ms. Edens and Don brought up some concerns about the language. And so I'd like to ask the city attorney, are you confident in this language? Or were you exposed to any sort of, substantive problem with this that we'll have to go back and have egg on our face trying to fix?
I'm confident with the substantive language, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The caveat being we'll editorially take out the whereas.
Sure,
clause that's
right.
not- Okay, Councilmember Jackson.
So I very much appreciate everyone's comments here and value all of your opinions. The thing I'm struggling with on this one is I have no doubt that when the charter was written,
So is this on referral?
it is.
Okay,
I have no doubt that when the charter was written, that they understood what managers do and don't do. And they purposely chose to keep these three positions with these positions with the council, within the council's purview for hiring and firing. So if we're gonna make that change, I feel like we have to move slowly and we have to do it the right way. And that's why I'm in favor of the motion.
okay, thank you. All right, we'll do a show of hands. All in favor of the motion to refer, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3. All opposed, please raise your right hand. Any abstentions? Motion to refer fails. So that takes us back to the bill. We had a lot of discussion. I kind of let it go that went into substance, but at least we got it all done. And so that wasn't exactly procedurally correctly, but it will save time now, hopefully. Okay, any other questions on the bill, Councilmember Edens?
Yep, I mean, since it's not going back to committee, I'd like to do a floor amendment for the language.
What is your motion to amend?
Well, so this is why I wanted to go back to committee, because I don't know what's duplicated in the handbook and what isn't, and I would like to have some other concerns addressed. So and if besides that, I'm not sure that this should happen at all. So okay, go to the second page, basis of first paragraph, last sentence, basis of merit and fitness demonstrated by
So
examination.
can I get your amendment first? What is your amendment? What do you?
Yeah, I was telling you the wording I was adding.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Words-
I didn't pick that up. So start, what is the language? Where are you wanting to put it? And what is that language?
Yeah, okay, all right, so the end of this, the first paragraph on the second page, okay, so it's the last sentence. Basis of merit and fitness demonstrated by examination or other evidence. I'd like to add in the word, and documented. So
Demonstrated and
document
documented by examination?
or document, well. By examination or documented by other, one's a whole section. So this is why I wanted.
So my
to go
question is,
back
how
to
many do you
committee.
have? How many amendments do you have?
It's one amendment, but I was trying to roll it into one amendment.
Well,
Unless
we
you want to
want to- how many-
separate it.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
I don't understand what you're asking.
How many parts of the amendment do you have? How many things are you gonna want to change?
Okay, well, I'd like to add a section on defining terms and conditions for removal of employees and processes to be used. So if you want to define that as
Okay, I
two
got it.
types of things.
That's fine.
or-
That's what I wanted. So the first one, we'll take them in order. We got to get, since this is a legal type thing, I think we want to hear from our city attorney. So you're saying in the last sentence, all appointments and promotions with the city administrative officers and employees shall be on the basis of merit and fitness demonstrated by examination or documented by other evidence of competence.
Mhm.
So the city administrator can respond to that. I guess my question is going to be whether that limits our legal ability. If there's evidence of competence, I would want to know about it, whether it's documented or not, but that's a city.
I mean,
attorney's call.
and this is a section on
It's okay.
appointments and promotions,
That's
not on
right.
firings,
Right.
but to be clear.
Yep. Thank you for that clarification.
Mhm.
City
Yep.
attorney, your opinion? Advisable or inadvisable or what?
Well, first, that particular language only applies to appointments or promotions,
Right.
and part of that process is an interview process, which is not a documented thing. So I'm a little hesitant to suggest moving forward with that language.
But promotions to me indicates it's part of a performance review or somebody in-house.
Right,
could
but it says
be.
appointments and promotions, so there may be.
Okay, because you're saying that word is lumped in with.
Well,
the
even a
appointment.
promotion may have an interview component to it.
Right. But I would hope that documented.
Well, I mean, he's given his opinion. You can still make the motion to amend it. I mean, the council could choose not to take his advice, but he's saying he doesn't recommend it. So if
Okay,
you wanna move-
let's put a pin in it, but I mean, you can see what guys, why I wanted to go back to committee, so. Some of the complaints over the years that I've heard from my time on council and from before on council is. We draw from individuals from various backgrounds, whether it's, private sector engineering, public sector, private sector, something else, and they're coming in with different levels of people management training. And we don't know what we're going to get in the future. The best candidate for the job may have come from the pothole industry, whatever. So the point is, somewhere we need to start doing a better job of defining conditions for removal of employees, indicating conditions for discharge, for performance improvement plans, and progressive discipline processes. And
So do you have an amendment you want to propose relative to that?
I want to add an entire section on that. Yeah,
Do you have it written or?
I don't, because I didn't expect a charter amendment to have a second reading and not discussion at committee level. So I have a general concept, and then, I mean,
So
we don't have another meeting this month, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, we would need to have the language, right? I mean, I guess though, I'd ask the city attorney to give his opinion on this. If I understand correctly what you're suggesting, though, I'm not sure that couldn't easily be handled. Well, first of all, we may already have written material on that, and I guess that'd be my first question to address what you're talking about.
Mhm.
If we don't, I think that could be done absent this in any event. Well, let me get an answer. So,
Well, number one, I want to make clear that the language that we're discussing is something that exists in the charter now, is not something that was proposed as an amendment in this particular bill. Second, in terms of establishing policies and procedures and details of criteria for employment or disciplinary action, that is something that I believe we have, and more appropriately is in an employee policies and procedures manual, and I would not recommend putting it in the charter.
okay, and that is why I asked about whether or not it was in the manual, but again, there was no committee to ask this on. Without having a discussion on that and seeing that, I'm not comfortable with this for final passage
okay,
tonight. I'm
that's
just
fair.
not.
So do you want to make an amendment or no?
If it's not appropriate for the charter language, then how would I address that later? Because I'm being asked to give up power
think
of
that-
review. And I don't feel like the guardrails are in place or have been used without damaging the car for me to give up authoritative review.
So I think that would be a conversation probably to start with the city attorney and our city administrator, but definitely the city attorney is the best way to get to the point you want to get to.
I mean, is it even possible? Because this affects my support on this, period. I mean,
I think the simple answer is the council approves the policies and procedures manual, and you can review that.
I mean, so, I mean, maybe then that my concerns are basically implementation of it rather
could be.
than,
That's why
and
I'm-
that could be, that
And
could
that's
be
why
it.
I'm
but I'm
suggesting that
still-
conversation happen so you can identify it.
I'm just,
So any amendment?
I guess not.
Okay. Any other discussion?
And like, oh, wait, actually, what if we, I mean, could we just write a simple sentence then? About in accordance with our policies in our handbook, reworded more appropriately?
City Attorney Young.
Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting that in the charter. Because it's referring to something that's subject to change over time. So I just wouldn't recommend putting it in the charter.
But it's always going to exist though. So it's kind of like an ordinance referring to the charter. The charter exists, but the charter can change, right? So why can't we just refer back to a non-specific clause?
And I understand that, but when you put something into a charter, it is kind of frozen in time to a certain extent. So I just, depending upon the language that's used, but I just simply wouldn't recommend deferring in the charter to something that's approved by ordinance. So its enforcement of the charter is dependent upon something that can change from time to time. It takes away the permanency of the charter.
Yeah, all right. I hear what you're saying. I just. My concerns haven't been met. We have a policy in place to. Review arguments made. By. Any city administrator that comes in and has a problem with staff. And so I wish we had more time to discuss this, so I wouldn't have to be,
Fair enough. Councilmember Dodwell.
Might I amend the request to refer back to committee, and instead of referring this charter amendment back to committee, that we have the admin or it would be admin and public works committee review the policies and procedures that would help support the concerns that have been stated tonight, because I think that's a better place, especially based upon what our city attorney just said. That's a better place to be putting in the level of detail that the council members are questioning and referring to this evening. Rather than have this particular thing that's going before the voters. I don't think we need to get to that level of detail. We need to update our policy and procedure manual if we're concerned about it.
That would be a separate motion, which would be in order after this is addressed. Okay, seeing nothing, Councilmember Jackson.
So I think ultimately I could be persuaded to be in favor of something like this, of giving the city administrator this authority. But I'm going to speak in opposition to it tonight because, again, I feel like we are rushing this and I do not see the reason for it. So.
Thank you. See no further discussion. Councilor Edens, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 27. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. City Clerk Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage. That's what happens when you talk 5 times, Councilor Edens. I get not that it wasn't great discussion.
Yeah.
You got me confused, but that's my fault.
Me.
City Clerk Eldridge, please call the roll.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
This is the final vote, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
No.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
No.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
No.
Councilmember Nyan.
Yes.
Okay, the bill has passed and will be presented to voters. Thank you for that. And Councilmember Bartoni, I want to just, if I could, take a point of personal privilege. Your comments are very salient about committee work. And to answer your question, in my mind, as a couple of other council members mentioned, it does relate to the selection of our new city administrator and the timing of that. Unfortunately, as it is with the April ballot. So, but your comments I take very much to heart, and thank you for making them. So,
Well, the city has never had a problem finding a city administrator, and this is not going to change the pool of candidates.
I don't think either of us know whether that's actually the case or not. It's pure speculation. But my point is that I think that makes it better, at least as to attracting the best possible candidates for it. And you can certainly disagree with that, but that was my reasoning. And all I wanted to do, I didn't want to debate you with it. I just wanted to give you my reasoning, and thank you for your comments.
And I just wanted to reply. And
Fair enough.
we've had good city administrators with the current charter.
I got you. All right, that takes us to resolutions which are on the consent agenda. We do have the following items on the, and it actually takes us to the consent agenda. First item is minutes. Second is approval of the authority for expenditures. Third is our records retention, destruction of records policy. Next is an appointment to our Wildwood Celebration Commission, Deborah Coleman from Ward 6. It's a reappointment, actually. She filled a vacant term or the end of a term, and we're now putting her in a full term. And then we have two resolutions, resolution 2023-1 and resolution 2023-2 that relate to bridge replacements in Ward 1. The first is Bridge 387. The second is Bridge 386. And those have to do with making application to the East West Gateway Council and the Missouri Department of Transportation for federal funding. So if there's anyone who objects to any item, we can remove it from the consent agenda. If there's not, otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. It'll take care of all of them at once. Councilmember Clark.
I do have one question about resolution 2023-1.
Okay, what is that?
This is for Director Brown. This was an issue that we had with some easement area in Babbler, and that it was going to take like 2 years to get this completed. Where are we on that 2-year span? Have we started that, or will we wait and start that later?
Mr. Brown, can you answer that question, please?
Councilmember Clark, I would say we're at the beginning of that process. The consultant is preparing the documentation, if I recall correctly, that would need to go to the state parks to start that process.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Councilmember Clark?
For now, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Bench, I see your hand. Did you want to speak on one of the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there is a third resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apology. Thank you. Resolution 2023-3, which relates to the approval of the waiver granted by the proposed West Eden subdivision as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you for that, Mr. Benich. Any questions on anything else on the consent agenda? If not, if someone would like to make a motion to approve it, that would be in order. Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It is approved. Anything under miscellaneous? Then that takes us to adjournment. Motion to adjourn made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. It's a non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the council meeting is adjourned. We now will go back into our work session, which was recessed. And the last item is an executive session. I don't think it will take very long, but this means that the members of the public, unfortunately, can't be part of that. And so I just want to thank all of you so much for being here tonight and for being part of Wildwood. Look forward to seeing you again. we did vote on the motion to adjourn, correct? Okay, yes. Councilor Edens?
I know it's out of order because it's a miscellaneous work session question, but while we have department heads available, do you mind if I ask regarding speeding on Strecker?
Is that something it's really not speeding on Strecker?
Well, I just had we talked about it the last couple of work sessions. Some residents had concerns. And there was, my understanding was going to be an effort for increased speed monitoring by police, and they have not seen that yet. So I was just looking for an update.
Sure.
And I didn't want to make
Nope, I got you.
people
So-
wait an hour.
So I'll put it this way, technically, we've adjourned that meeting. However, I'm certain that they heard what you're wanting, and I'll bet you
Yeah.
can get an email from them and.
Yeah,
and
I was
Councilor-
trying to ask it for the
Just
work
one-
session.
Just one second.
Yeah.
Councilor Bartoni as well, be copied on that since it's your ward. Good with you? Okay, all right. So. Okay, so we're going to take a motion to go into Ms. Vedbig, we're in session, if you could please. So we need a motion to go into executive session for the work session. That's made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano, Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Nian,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Focus. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to go into executive session. If everyone would please turn off your microphone.
Testing, testing.
Hit your head against the wall. Well, my friend. Which probably. All right, I want to welcome everyone back to our work session. We've completed the executive session, and so all that is left is a motion to adjourn. And we have a motion to adjourn made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. It's a non-debatable motion, so all in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?